Eleanor, 67, believes she can distinguish sincerity from deceit. She hosts a joyful baby shower for her daughter-in-law, Serena. Eleanor goes to the garden shed for napkins, overhearing Serena. Serena, speaking to her friend Olivia, reveals a cruel plan. Once I get my hands on the inheritance, I'll divorce him and disappear. Serena plans to use the baby to access Daniel's inheritance. Olivia questions the baby's fate. Serena dismisses it, focused on child support. Eleanor's hands go numb, her world shattering. Brenda calls for Eleanor, who feigns composure. Eleanor navigates the rest of the party like an actress, observing Serena. Daniel notes Eleanor's paleness. Serena feigns concern. Eleanor tells Serena a mother should do whatever it takes to protect her family. That night, Eleanor rereads Arthur's will letter, his wisdom echoing. Grief hardens into resolve. Daniel might be blinded, but Eleanor is not. Eleanor, at 67, possessed a rare gift, or perhaps a sharpened intuition born from a life rich with experiences, both sweet and bitter. She prided herself on being able to distinguish the genuine gleam of sincerity from the polished veneer of deceit. Her heart, though weathered by time and loss, remained open, yet her mind was shrewd, quick to notice the subtle nuances in human interaction. She had seen enough to know that appearances were often the most cunning disguises, and she trusted her gut more than any spoken word. Today, however, her heart was overflowing with an unadulterated joy that seemed to banish all shadows of doubt. The sprawling backyard of her home, usually a quiet sanctuary, buzzed with laughter and the gentle clinking of glasses. Pastel ribbons adorned the rose arbors, and a cascade of tiny, hand-knitted booties spilled from a wicker basket on the main table. Eleanor had poured her soul into organizing this baby shower for Serena, her daughter-in-law, and Daniel, her beloved son. Every detail, from the lemon lavender scones to the whimsical "Welcome Little One" banner, spoke of her excitement. Her Daniel, her steady, kind son, was about to become a father. And Serena, with her bright smiles and seemingly sweet disposition, was about to bring her first grandchild into the world. Eleanor watched Serena, radiant in a flowing white dress, accepting gifts with graceful thanks, and felt a profound sense of contentment. The party was in full swing, a symphony of happy chatter, when Eleanor realized they were running low on napkins. "Oh dear," she murmured, excusing herself from a conversation with her oldest friend, Brenda. "I've a fresh stack in the garden shed. Be right back." The shed, a charming wooden structure nestled beneath an old oak, was just a short walk from the main patio. As she approached, her mind still humming with the joyous energy of the party, she heard voices. Two female voices, hushed but distinct, coming from just beyond the shed door. Serena's, and she recognized Serena's friend Olivia's. Eleanor hesitated, not wanting to interrupt a private moment, but then curiosity, a faint, inexplicable prickle, held her in place. She was just reaching for the doorknob when Serena's voice, devoid of its usual sweetness, sliced through the air. "Honestly, Olivia," Serena scoffed, a brittle laugh following, "this whole motherhood charade is exhausting. All these saccharine comments about tiny clothes and sleepless nights, they have no idea." Olivia mumbled something in response, too low for Eleanor to catch. But Serena's next words hit Eleanor like a physical blow. "Once I get my hands on the inheritance, I'll divorce him and disappear," Serena stated, her voice chillingly devoid of emotion. "It's all about timing. The baby is merely the key to unlock Daniel's trust fund. You know Arthur's ridiculous will. Everything tied to establishing a family. Well, a baby counts, doesn't it?" Eleanor's breath hitched. Her husband, Arthur, had been a man of immense foresight and caution, particularly when it came to his family's legacy. He'd stipulated that a substantial portion of Daniel's inheritance would only be fully accessible once he had established a stable family unit, a clause meant to ensure Daniel's maturity and commitment. To hear it twisted into such a calculating weapon designed for betrayal made Eleanor's stomach churn. "But the baby?" Olivia's voice, hesitant, broke the momentary silence. "What about the child, Serena? Your own baby?" Serena's response was a dismissive flick of the wrist, a sound that conveyed utter contempt. "Oh, please. It'll be a little prop for a while, useful for securing that money. After that, child support is a guaranteed income stream, isn't it? A bonus, really. I'm not signing up for 20 years of diaper duty and PTA meetings. Darling, my life is waiting. Eleanor's hands, which had been reaching for the shed door, went numb. The elegant crystal bowl of napkins she imagined retrieving seemed to vanish from her mind. The vibrant garden, the joyous sounds of the party, all faded into a distant hum. Her world, which moments ago had been bathed in the warm glow of familial happiness, shattered into a million icy fragments. The beautiful tapestry of her son's future, woven with threads of love and security, was being systematically unraveled by the very person he had chosen to build it with. Her grandson, the innocent little life she had celebrated with such fervor, was nothing more than a bargaining chip, a pawn in a cruel financial game. A cold dread, unlike anything she had ever known, seeped into her bones. Eleanor, are you all right? We need those napkins. Brenda's voice, closer now, jolted Eleanor back from the precipice of despair. She instinctively pulled back from the shed, her mind racing, scrambling to construct a mask of normalcy. Her heart pounded a frantic rhythm against her ribs, but her face, she hoped, betrayed none of the seismic shift that had just occurred within her. She took a deep, shaky breath, pushing the horror deep down, burying it under layers of composure. "Coming, dear," Eleanor called back, forcing a lightness into her tone that felt like ash in her mouth. She grabbed a stack of napkins, her movements stiff, mechanical. Stepping back into the sunlight, she felt as though she had entered a stage play, every interaction now a carefully rehearsed performance. She smiled, she laughed, she accepted compliments on the food, all while her mind replayed Serena's callous words, dissecting every syllable. She watched Serena, now back among the guests, her face once again a picture of maternal serenity, and saw not the sweet daughter-in-law she thought she knew, but a venomous viper in disguise. The way Serena touched Daniel's arm, the way she patted her slightly bulging belly with a tender smile, it was all a grotesque act. Every gesture, every soft word was a lie. Later, as the sun began its descent, casting long shadows across the lawn, Daniel approached her, his brow furrowed with concern. "Mom, you look a little pale. Are you feeling all right? This whole thing must be exhausting for you." His touch on her arm was warm, genuine. Before Eleanor could respond, Serena materialized beside him, her hand gliding over Eleanor's forehead with a simulated touch of care. "Oh, Eleanor, dear, you must be worn out. You've done so much. We should make sure you get some rest." Eleanor met Serena's gaze, a flicker of something she couldn't quite name passing between them. The feigned concern was almost laughable, now that Eleanor knew the truth. It was a performance perfected. Eleanor offered a faint, tight smile. Her voice, though soft, held an unexpected steel. "I'm perfectly fine, darling. Just a little reflective. You know," she continued, her eyes still locked with Serena's, the smile not quite reaching them, "a mother should do whatever it takes to protect her family." Serena's smile faltered for a fraction of a second, a tiny flicker of confusion, before she quickly recovered, nodding vaguely. Daniel, oblivious, simply squeezed Eleanor's hand reassuringly. That night, the house was silent, the last echoes of celebration having faded. Eleanor sat alone in her study, the worn leather-bound copy of Arthur's last will and testament open on her lap. His precise, elegant handwriting seemed to offer comfort, yet also a stark reminder of the responsibility he had entrusted her with. Arthur, ever the protector, had always been wary of those who sought to exploit the family's good name and fortune. His wisdom, so often dismissed by Daniel as overly cautious, now echoed in Eleanor's mind like a prophetic warning. He had structured the inheritance carefully, not just to provide for his children, but to safeguard their future against predators. He had always said, "Eleanor, my love, you have a keen eye for character. Trust your instincts. If ever there is a doubt, remember, the truest gold is always tested by fire." The initial shock and grief for her son's impending heartbreak slowly congealed into a cold, hard resolve. Daniel, her sweet, trusting Daniel, might be blinded by love, by the joy of fatherhood. But Eleanor was not. The fire Arthur spoke of had just erupted in her garden, and she would not stand by and let it consume her family. She would do whatever it took, just as she had subtly warned Serena, to protect her son, her legacy, and the innocent grandchild whose life was already being callously factored into a betrayal. A mother's love, she knew, was the most formidable force on earth, and hers had just found a new, urgent purpose. 3 nights bled into one another, indistinguishable blurs of anxious thought for Eleanor. Sleep, usually a welcome companion, had become an elusive phantom. Every time she closed her eyes, Serena's voice, sharp and chilling, echoed in the silent chambers of her mind. Once I get my hands on the inheritance, I'll divorce him and disappear. And then the sickening addendum. The baby is merely the key. The words were etched into her memory, a cruel mantra that played on an endless loop, stealing her peace and replacing it with a cold, gnawing dread. She would lie rigid in bed, staring at the shadows on the ceiling, replaying every gesture, every smile, every seemingly innocuous conversation Serena had ever had with Daniel, searching for clues, for signs she had missed. The betrayal was a festering wound in her heart, not just for Daniel, but for the innocent life growing inside Serena, a life Eleanor had so eagerly anticipated. The most immediate, overwhelming urge was to confront Daniel, to tear down the veil of deceit that shrouded his happiness. But a chilling realization held her back. Daniel, so utterly enamored, so joyously expectant of fatherhood, would never believe her. He would see it as a misunderstanding, a jealous mother's misinterpretation, or worse, a deliberate attempt to sabotage his marriage. Eleanor could picture his wounded expression, the bewilderment in his eyes, the eventual hardening as he sided with his wife. She imagined the rift it would create, a chasm that might swallow their own precious relationship whole. No, simply relaying overheard words, no matter how damning, would not be enough. It would only alienate her son and give Serena the upper hand, allowing her to spin a tale of Eleanor's overbearing nature. Eleanor knew with a certainty that settled deep in her bones that she needed concrete, irrefutable evidence. Something that would stand up against Serena's practiced charm and Daniel's unwavering loyalty. Something that would shatter his illusions without destroying him in the process. The task felt monumental, terrifying, but a mother's instinct to protect was a powerful, unyielding force. The next morning, after a weak cup of tea and another sleepless night, Eleanor found herself driving to Dorothy's house. Dorothy, her friend of 40 years, knew her better than anyone. She was a woman of quiet strength, sharp wit, and an unshakable sense of loyalty. Confiding in Dorothy was a terrifying step, admitting her deepest fears aloud, but Eleanor couldn't bear the burden alone any longer. As she recounted the horrifying conversation, her voice barely a whisper, tears finally pricked at her eyes, tears of frustration and helplessness. Dorothy listened, her usually lively face growing grim, her hand reaching across the kitchen table to squeeze Eleanor's. "Oh, Eleanor," Dorothy murmured, her voice laced with a profound sadness. "That's unspeakable. Truly, truly awful." Her words, full of empathy, were a balm to Eleanor's tormented soul. Dorothy didn't dismiss her fears, didn't suggest she might have misheard. She understood the gravity immediately. "You're right not to go to Daniel yet," Dorothy continued, her brow furrowed in thought. "He's too deep in love, too excited. He wouldn't see it. He couldn't. You need proof, Eleanor, solid proof." Then Dorothy, ever the pragmatist, asked a question that shifted Eleanor's perspective. "Eleanor, looking back, were there any other signs? Anything that, now through this terrible lens, might make more sense?" Eleanor paused, letting Dorothy's questions settle. She closed her eyes, reaching back through the memories of Serena's presence in their lives. And then, like pieces of a puzzle suddenly clicking into place, details emerged, once dismissed as charming quirks or thoughtful inquiries, now revealing a chilling pattern. Serena's almost immediate and persistent interest in the family finances, for instance. Eleanor had initially found it refreshing, a sign of a responsible partner interested in their shared future. But now she recalled how Serena would subtly steer conversations towards Arthur's legacy, asking specific questions about how the assets were structured or when Daniel would truly come into his own. She'd always seemed particularly fascinated by the details of Arthur's will, a document Eleanor herself had only skimmed through, trusting Arthur's meticulous planning. Eleanor's mind flashed back to the months following Daniel and Serena's wedding. Serena had, with an almost frantic intensity, expressed her desire to start a family right away. At the time, Eleanor had attributed it to the flush of newlywed bliss, the natural yearning for a child. But now she remembered Serena's seemingly innocent comments about building a secure future and the perfect timing. The timing Serena had referenced in the garden shed about the baby being the key suddenly illuminated everything. It wasn't about love or the natural progression of a family. It was about Arthur's specific inheritance clause. Arthur, in his unwavering commitment to family and stability, had indeed stipulated that a significant portion of Daniel's trust fund, established from the family business, would be fully transferred upon the birth of his first child. He had believed it would encourage responsible family planning and provide a strong financial foundation for the next generation. It was a substantial sum, enough to provide true financial independence. Serena knew this. She had targeted it with a precision that now horrified Eleanor. "I have to find out more about her," Eleanor declared, a new steel entering her voice. The shock and fear were beginning to morph into a quiet, simmering rage, a determination to protect what was hers. "I have to know who she really is." Dorothy nodded, her eyes reflecting Eleanor's resolve. "That's a good place to start. People tend to leave digital footprints these days, even if they try to erase them." Back home, Eleanor sat in front of her laptop, a device she usually only used for emails and online gardening forums. Her fingers, usually clumsy on the keyboard, typed Serena Donovan with surprising speed. The search results were exactly what one might expect. Smiling photos on social media, a LinkedIn profile detailing an unremarkable marketing career, a few charitable event mentions. Nothing suspicious, nothing that hinted at the calculating woman she now knew. A wave of doubt threatened to engulf her. Had she imagined it all? Was Dorothy wrong? Was she, Eleanor, simply a suspicious old woman? Then a thought struck her. Serena's middle name. Daniel had mentioned it once, casually, during a conversation about wedding invitations. Serena Elizabeth Donovan. Eleanor typed the full name into the search bar, her heart hammering. This time the results were different. Buried several pages deep, almost an afterthought, was a small article from a local society blog, dated 5 years prior. The headline was innocuous: "Caldwell Donovan engagement called off." Eleanor clicked the link, her breath catching in her throat. The article, brief and discreet, reported the mutual decision to end the engagement between Liam Caldwell, the scion of a prominent real estate development family, and Serena Elizabeth Donovan. It spoke of irreconcilable differences and wished both parties well. Liam Caldwell. The name resonated with wealth and influence. Daniel had never mentioned Serena being engaged before him. When Eleanor had once playfully probed about Serena's past relationships, Daniel had simply shrugged, saying, "Oh, nothing serious, Mom. Just a few dates, before I came along." The truth was a bitter pill. Nothing serious indeed. Serena had been engaged to a wealthy business heir, and that engagement had ended. Eleanor looked at the smiling picture of Serena from the article, a much younger version, but undeniably her. The same bright, seemingly innocent smile. It was a pattern. Serena wasn't just after Daniel's inheritance. She had a history of targeting wealth and a history of abruptly ending relationships when, presumably, her plans didn't pan out. The pieces of the puzzle were not just clicking, they were locking into place with terrifying precision. The faint article about Liam Caldwell was a chilling confirmation. Yet it was only a single thread in what Eleanor suspected was a much larger, darker tapestry. She needed more. Her own rudimentary internet searches had yielded little beyond that, and she knew her tech skills were no match for someone truly skilled in digital forensics. There was only one person she could turn to. Her niece, Chloe. Chloe, a sharp, independent woman in her early 30s, ran a small but highly effective private investigation firm specializing in corporate due diligence. She was discreet, utterly trustworthy, and possessed a knack for uncovering hidden truths. Eleanor called Chloe, her voice carefully modulated to sound casual, though her heart was a drum in her chest. She explained that she needed a discreet background check on Serena, mentioning only that she had some concerns about her son's wife and wanted to be thorough. Chloe, sensing the underlying urgency in her aunt's tone, agreed without further questions, her professional instincts kicking in. "Aunt Eleanor," she'd said gently, "I'll see what I can find. Give me a few days." Chloe, true to her word, delivered a comprehensive report a few days later. The information was damning. Beyond the publicly reported broken engagement with Liam Caldwell, Chloe had unearthed two other significant relationships in Serena's past. There was Ethan Wu, the son of a prominent real estate developer whose family held vast land holdings in the city's burgeoning tech corridor. That relationship had ended abruptly after 3 years, just as the Wu family had restructured their assets into an irrevocable trust, making them untouchable by any future spouse. Before Ethan, there had been a wealthy, recently divorced man named Marcus Thorne, a venture capitalist who, after a whirlwind courtship, had suddenly grown cold when Serena's urgent requests for investment capital became too frequent and demanding. That relationship had also dissolved swiftly. A clear, undeniable pattern emerged, stark and terrifying in its consistency. Serena didn't simply fall in love. She strategically attached herself to wealthy men, orbiting their financial spheres like a predator. Each relationship had lasted only as long as the prospect of easy access to substantial wealth remained viable. The moment the money became difficult to access, or when the men proved too shrewd to be easily manipulated, Serena would move on, leaving a trail of broken engagements and discarded affections. Her romantic history wasn't a series of unfortunate luck. It was a carefully orchestrated campaign of financial opportunism. Chloe had also dug deep into Serena's older social media profiles, long since deactivated or scrubbed clean. There, in the digital archives, was a stark contrast to the simple girl persona Serena had so meticulously crafted for Daniel. Photos depicted Serena posing with designer handbags, vacationing on luxury yachts in the Mediterranean, attending exclusive parties draped in expensive jewelry. The Serena in those pictures was not the modest, unassuming woman who claimed to prefer quiet evenings at home and talked about saving for a modest future. This Serena reveled in opulence, a stark contradiction to the facade she presented to Daniel, who prided himself on his grounded, unpretentious lifestyle. Armed with this devastating information, Eleanor felt a cold dread solidify into a potent resolve. The whisper in the garden was no longer just an unsettling secret. It was a blueprint for betrayal. She knew what she had to do. A few days later, Eleanor decided to pay Daniel and Serena an unannounced visit. She used the excuse of returning some platters left over from the baby shower, a perfectly plausible reason. As she pulled into their driveway, she straightened her dress, steeling herself for the performance. Serena opened the door, her smile bright and welcoming, a picture of contented, expectant motherhood. She wore a loose, flowing maternity dress that accentuated her baby bump, her hair perfectly styled. "Eleanor, what a lovely surprise," she exclaimed, ushering her in. Daniel emerged from the living room, equally pleased to see his mother. Eleanor exchanged pleasantries. Her eyes, however, were not on Serena's face, but on her hands, her wrists, her neck. She noticed the subtle glimmer of a new diamond pendant nestled at her throat, a delicate but undeniably expensive piece. On her wrist, a thin gold bracelet with tiny sparkling charms. These weren't heirloom pieces, nor were they modest. They were recent, stylish, and clearly costly. Serena, the simple girl who insisted on saving for their future, was accessorizing with quiet extravagance. During their casual chat, Eleanor deliberately steered the conversation. "It's wonderful to see you two so happy," she began, her gaze resting pointedly on Serena. "You know, for Arthur and me, family always meant everything. It was the bedrock of everything we built." Eleanor watched Serena carefully. For a fleeting moment, she detected a subtle flicker in Serena's eyes. A momentary pause, a silent appraisal. It was a flicker of caution, quickly masked by a practiced smile and a soft, "Oh, absolutely, Eleanor. Family is paramount." As the conversation meandered, Serena, with deceptive casualness, asked, "Daniel was telling me about that beautiful lakefront property the family owns. It sounds stunning. Has anyone ever considered selling it? It must be quite an asset." Eleanor's heart gave a silent thud. The lakefront property. It was a cherished family retreat, left specifically to Daniel and his future children, with strict clauses preventing its sale until Daniel's children reached adulthood, or unless specific, dire circumstances were met. Daniel hadn't mentioned this property to Serena, not in any detail anyway because it wasn't liquid. It was a legacy, meant to be enjoyed, not cashed out. Serena's mention of it confirmed Eleanor's deepest suspicions. She wasn't merely fishing for information. She was probing for weaknesses, for potential sources of funds she hadn't yet identified. She was already mentally liquidating family assets, mapping out her escape route. A heavy-hearted resolve settled over Eleanor. The desire to confront Serena directly, to unleash her fury and expose the lies, was almost overwhelming. But she knew it would be fruitless. Serena would deny everything, turn it around, and make Eleanor seem like the irrational one. No, direct confrontation was not the path. She needed to set a trap, an elaborate snare that would expose Serena's true intentions to Daniel himself in a way he couldn't deny. He needed to see it with his own eyes, hear it with his own ears, undeniable and irrefutable. Later that evening, after leaving Daniel and Serena, Eleanor called Serena, her voice carefully pitched to convey a newfound trusting warmth. "Serena, dear," she began, "I've been thinking. With the baby coming and all the exciting changes, I believe it's time we had a proper family dinner to discuss some important financial matters. Specifically, some aspects of Arthur's will that will impact Daniel and the baby's future. I think it would be good for you to be fully informed, darling." She paused, letting the bait dangle. Serena's response was instantaneous, her usual measured tone replaced by an eager, almost breathless quality. "Oh, Eleanor, that sounds absolutely wonderful. We'd love that. When would be best?" The eagerness in her voice, the immediate shift from polite interest to thinly veiled avidity, was all the confirmation Eleanor needed. Serena had taken the bait, hook, line, and sinker. The game had begun. Eleanor awoke on the day of the planned dinner with a strange, unnerving calmness. The frantic anxiety that had plagued her for days had subsided, replaced by a quiet, determined resolve. She felt like a general preparing for battle, every move calculated, every emotion suppressed in favor of strategy. The fear for Daniel was still a dull ache, but now it was overshadowed by a fierce need for justice, for truth. She decided to make a slight alteration to her plan, a quick call to Daniel. "Darling," she said, her voice warm and inviting, "could you possibly come a little earlier tonight? I was hoping we could have a quiet moment. Just us before Serena arrives. There's something I wanted to chat about, just a brief catch-up." Daniel, ever obliging, agreed, saying he'd be there about 45 minutes before Serena. Eleanor needed that time alone with him, to subtly plant the seeds of doubt, to prepare him, however gently, for the seismic shift that was about to occur. When Daniel arrived, the doorbell chiming precisely at the agreed-upon time, Eleanor greeted him with a hug. As she held him, she felt a weariness in his frame that hadn't been there before. His eyes, usually bright with optimism, held a subtle shadow, a hint of stress. "Everything all right, darling?" she asked, leading him into the sitting room. Daniel sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Just work, you know. And the baby's coming so soon, there's a lot to think about. New responsibilities." He settled onto the sofa, looking truly tired. Eleanor poured him a glass of iced tea, her movements unhurried. "And how are things with Serena? Is she coping well with all the excitement?" she asked casually, her gaze unwavering. Daniel hesitated, picking at a loose thread on the cushion. She's been a little particular lately, Mom. More so than usual." He looked up, a faint frown creasing his brow. "Especially about money and the inheritance. She brings it up almost every day." He paused, then confessed, "I don't know why she's so concerned about money suddenly. I keep telling her not to worry, that we're fine, that Dad's planning was solid, but she presses on it." He looked genuinely bewildered. Eleanor's heart sank, a sickening certainty washing over her. Serena wasn't just concerned, she was growing impatient. The waiting was clearly frustrating her, making her reckless. Her mask was slipping, even with Daniel, subtly eroding his trust. This was both heartbreaking and, in a twisted way, helpful for Eleanor's plan. Daniel was already sensing something was amiss. The foundation of his belief in Serena was already cracking. I feel a bit embarrassed about it, honestly," Daniel continued, his voice lowering. "She's carrying our child, and she should feel secure. But sometimes her questions are, well, they make me feel like she doubts my ability to provide, or that she's looking for something specific. And then I feel guilty for even thinking that." Because, baby hormones and all that. He gestured vaguely, clearly conflicted. Eleanor reached over and gently squeezed his hand. It's all right, Daniel. It's perfectly normal to have concerns, especially when you're about to become a father. It's a huge responsibility, and you're thinking about your family's future. That's a good thing, and it's also okay to feel uncertain sometimes about anything that affects your peace of mind. She offered him a reassuring smile, knowing that her words were planting fertile ground for what was to come. Then Eleanor created her opening. Chilly, she began, her tone shifting to a more serious but still calm register. That's partly why I wanted to talk to you tonight. Before the baby arrives, I thought we should discuss some aspects of your father's will. Not the general stuff, but some of the more specific provisions. The ones that pertain directly to the transfer of certain assets, particularly around the time a new grandchild arrives. Daniel looked confused. But Mom, I thought everything was pretty straightforward. Dad always made sure his wishes were clear. Most of the trust funds were structured to release gradually over time, or upon certain milestones. And the main bulk of it, as you know, was tied to the birth of my first child. We went over it with Mr. Henderson, the lawyer, a few years ago. It seemed all in order. Yes, Daniel, for the most part, it is straightforward, Eleanor affirmed, her voice maintaining its calm, measured pace. But Arthur, being Arthur, always had a contingency, always a safeguard. There are specific stipulations, certain conditions that need to be met for the full transfer of certain assets, particularly related to the family home and the lakefront property, and indeed a significant portion of the primary trust. Conditions that require, a certain level of integrity and commitment from all parties involved, especially the spouse and parent of the child. She deliberately made her explanations sound vague, complex, and slightly ominous, a perfect hook for Serena's greedy ears. She was about to elaborate on the details to spin a clever, deceptive web of clauses when the distinct chime of the doorbell cut her off. Serena, right on cue. Eleanor rose, a quiet sense of triumph mixing with the sorrow in her heart. Daniel, still looking slightly bewildered by her hints about the will, stood up as well. That must be Serena, he said, moving to open the door. Serena stood on the porch, a vision of radiant charm, a carefully selected ensemble of expensive maternity wear accentuating her pregnancy. Her smile was wide, almost dazzling, as she greeted Daniel, then Eleanor. Eleanor, darling, thank you so much for having us. This is such a lovely idea. Her eyes, however, weren't truly focused on either of them. They darted quickly around the elegant sitting room, then subtly scanned Eleanor's face, a barely perceptible flicker of keen anticipation in their depths. Eleanor knew exactly what Serena was searching for. Clues, hints, any indication of the financial matters to be discussed. She was eager, far too eager. The bait had been set, and Serena had bitten hard. The trap was sprung. If you are finding this story as gripping as I hope, please remember to like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss a single moment of what happens next. Your support means the world to me. Dinner was a meticulously orchestrated affair. Eleanor had prepared Daniel's favorite roast, and the conversation flowed around light, innocuous topics: the weather, local happenings, Daniel's work. Serena played her part beautifully, charming and attentive, laughing at Daniel's jokes, asking Eleanor about her garden. She painted a perfect picture of the loving wife and excited mother-to-be. Yet, beneath the veneer of pleasantry, Eleanor could sense Serena's impatience, a subtle tremor in her otherwise composed demeanor. Her eyes, though seemingly engaged in conversation, would occasionally dart towards Eleanor, a silent, expectant question. She was waiting for the moment the financial matters would be brought to the table. Eleanor prolonged the wait, savoring the subtle tension, observing the barely contained eagerness that flickered in Serena's gaze. Finally, after the last of the apple tart had been served and coffee poured, Serena could no longer contain herself. Leaning forward slightly, her voice a little too eager, she asked, "So, Eleanor, you mentioned there were some important financial matters you wanted to discuss tonight?" She added a sweet, "We're so eager to be fully informed about everything concerning Daniel's future, and of course the baby's." Eleanor met Serena's gaze, a knowing calm in her eyes. "Yes, Serena, I did. Important matters indeed, concerning Arthur's wishes and the arrangements for Daniel and the baby. She took a slow sip of her coffee, allowing the moment to hang in the air, building the anticipation. Serena, her eyes sparkling with what Eleanor now knew was avarice, nodded confidently. Of course. Daniel has always spoken so highly of his father's foresight. I assume it's about the trust fund and the transfer of the main inheritance upon the baby's arrival? That's what Daniel always understood, isn't it? Her tone implied a certain ownership, a foregone conclusion. Eleanor smiled, a faint, almost imperceptible curve of her lips that didn't quite reach her eyes. That was the general understanding, yes. And it is true that Arthur intended for a substantial portion of the assets to be accessible to Daniel to provide for his family. However, Arthur, being the meticulous man he was, also included certain specifics, certain safeguards that neither of you are fully aware of. Serena's confident smile wavered slightly. Daniel, who had been listening attentively, looked confused. Safeguards, Mom? What do you mean? Mr. Henderson never mentioned anything beyond the standard clauses. Arthur was a man who planned not just for prosperity, but for protection, Eleanor explained, her voice even, steady. He established a family trust, Daniel, far more extensive and complex than the basic one you were familiar with. This trust is managed by me as executor and ensures the long-term financial security of his descendants. Eleanor paused, allowing the words to sink in. The bulk of the family assets, including the investments and properties, are not directly transferred to you, Daniel, upon the baby's birth, as you might have believed. Serena's face, moments ago flushed with anticipation, began to drain of color. Her eyes narrowed almost imperceptibly. Not directly transferred, she repeated, her voice thin. No, Eleanor continued, shaking her head gently. They remain within the family trust until your child, our grandson, reaches the age of 25, or under certain other very specific conditions. She watched Serena, observing the tightening of her jaw, the way her knuckles whitened as she gripped her coffee cup. The mask was beginning to crack. What conditions? Serena demanded, the sweetness suddenly gone from her voice, replaced by a sharp, almost desperate edge. Eleanor set her coffee cup down with a soft click. Her gaze, cool and unwavering, locked with Serena's. One of the most significant conditions, Serena, she stated, is the divorce clause. Arthur specifically stipulated that if Daniel's marriage were to end in divorce before your child turns 25, then neither parent, neither you nor Daniel, would have direct access to the principal of the trust. The funds, while still available for the child's education and well-being, would be managed solely by a neutral, independent trustee until the child reaches majority. This was Arthur's way of ensuring that, in the event of marital dissolution, the child's financial future would remain entirely secure, protected from any potential disputes or attempts to claim the assets. The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken meaning. Serena's facade shattered. Her eyes blazed with a raw, unadulterated fury that Eleanor had only seen glimpses of in the garden shed. That's ridiculous, Serena exploded, her voice rising, losing all semblance of its earlier charm. It's infantilizing. What kind of man puts such restrictions on his son and his wife? It's absurd. It's controlling. What if we need that money for a new house, for investments? Are we supposed to beg a trustee for every penny? She was practically shouting now, her carefully constructed image crumbling around her. She had, in her fury, inadvertently revealed her true motives, her true priorities. It wasn't about the baby's well-being. It was about her direct access to the money. Daniel stared at his wife, his face a mask of shock and confusion. He had never seen Serena like this. Not truly. Her reaction was so intensely disproportionate, so vehemently focused on the money, that it was impossible to ignore. A seed of doubt carefully planted by Eleanor was now beginning to sprout with frightening speed. Eleanor remained calm amidst the storm, her expression unreadable. She reached into a folder she had subtly placed beside her chair and produced an aged, sealed envelope, slightly yellowed with time. Arthur foresaw the possibility of such a reaction, Serena, she said quietly, her voice cutting through Serena's outburst. He left this, He instructed me to open it only if Daniel found himself in a position where he might question his own judgment regarding matters of the heart and the family's future, especially before the birth of his first child. She handed the envelope to Daniel. Daniel, his hands trembling slightly, broke the seal. He unfolded the crisp, handwritten letter, his father's familiar script filling the page. He began to read aloud, his voice strained. "My dearest Daniel," Arthur's words began, "if you are reading this, it means your mother has found herself in a difficult position, and I trust her judgment implicitly. I have always known that love can, at times, blind even the most discerning of men. Your mother, however, has a keen eye for character. She sees people clearly, even when love might cloud your own vision. Listen to her, my son. Trust your mother. She will always do what is right to protect you and our family." Daniel's voice trailed off. He looked from the letter to Eleanor, then slowly, his gaze heavy with dawning realization, to Serena, who now stood frozen, her face a mask of fury and dawning horror. The trap had not only been sprung, it had snapped shut irrevocably. The silence that followed Daniel's reading of his father's letter was deafening, thick with the weight of revelation. Serena stood frozen, her fury momentarily eclipsed by a chilling comprehension of her exposed plan. Daniel, however, was still grappling with the implications, his eyes wide with disbelief. Eleanor reached across the table, her hand gently covering Daniel's, still clutching the letter. Her voice was soft, laced with a profound sadness. "He knew, Daniel. Your father knew. He knew that someday someone might try to take advantage of your trusting nature, might want you for all the wrong reasons." At Eleanor's words, Serena's composure finally snapped. With a sharp, sudden movement, she pushed her chair back, the screech of wood against the floor echoing in the stunned room. "I need some air," she muttered, her voice tight, barely audible, as she practically bolted from the dining room and out onto the patio, the glass door sliding shut with a soft thud behind her. She needed to regroup, to find her footing, but the damage was already done. Daniel, his gaze never leaving the patio door, turned slowly to Eleanor. His face was pale, etched with a raw confusion that was rapidly giving way to suspicion. "Mom," he whispered, his voice barely a breath, "what's really going on? What aren't you telling me?" Eleanor took a deep breath, steeling herself. This was the moment she had dreaded, the moment she would have to shatter her son's world, to reveal the ugly truth about the woman he loved. "Daniel, darling," she began, her voice unwavering, "I wish I didn't have to tell you this, but you deserve to know." She recounted everything, starting with the baby shower, the overheard conversation in the garden shed, Serena's chilling words to Olivia, "Once I get my hands on the inheritance, I'll divorce him and disappear. The baby is merely the key to unlock Daniel's trust fund." She detailed Serena's dismissive attitude towards the baby's fate, her callous focus on child support as a guaranteed income stream. As Eleanor spoke, Daniel's face drained of all color. He sat motionless, his eyes fixed on his mother, absorbing every devastating word. By the time she finished, his jaw was clenched, his knuckles white against his trousers. "No," he breathed, his voice cracking. That can't be true. She loves me. She loves us. She couldn't." The denial was reflexive, a desperate attempt to cling to the illusion he had built. Eleanor didn't argue. Instead, she reached for the folder she had prepared earlier, the one Chloe had compiled. She pushed it across the table to Daniel. "I wish it weren't true, son, but I had to know for sure. I had to protect you. So I had Chloe do some digging." She gestured to the folder. "This details Serena's past relationships. A pattern, Daniel, a very clear, very disturbing pattern." Daniel hesitated for a moment, then opened the folder with trembling hands. He flipped through the pages. The broken engagement to Liam Caldwell, the failed relationship with Ethan Wu, the venture capitalist Marcus Thorne. Each profile detailed a wealthy man, each relationship ending abruptly when the money wasn't easily accessible. He saw the old social media photos of Serena, draped in luxury, a stark contrast to the simple girl he thought he knew. The realization hit him hard. Serena had never mentioned any of these previous engagements or serious relationships. Nothing serious, he had told his mother, remembering Serena's casual dismissal of her past. He felt a sickening lurch in his stomach as the pieces slammed together. The picture was undeniable. The betrayal was complete. Just then, Serena re-entered the dining room, composed, her breathing regulated, a faint, practiced smile on her lips. She had evidently used her time on the patio to collect herself, to prepare for a counterattack. She slid back into her chair, attempting to exude an air of calm, injured innocence. Daniel looked up from the folder. His eyes, once so full of love and trust, now held a cold, hard anger Eleanor had rarely seen. "Serena," he began, his voice flat, devoid of emotion. "I knew you were pregnant. Does pregnancy make you dishonest too?" Serena's mask slipped completely. The practiced smile evaporated, replaced by a flash of pure, venomous rage. "How dare you?" she shrieked, her voice shrill. "How dare you listen to your mother, Daniel? She's poisoned you against me. She's always hated me, always tried to tear us apart because she can't stand to see you happy." She rounded on Eleanor, her eyes blazing. "This is all you're doing, you manipulative old woman. You're jealous, aren't you? Jealous of my youth, of my hold on your precious son's affection." Daniel, looking utterly exhausted and deeply wounded, held up a hand. "Stop, Serena, just stop. I'm tired of the games, the manipulation. I'm choosing the truth. It's all here." He tapped the folder. "And I heard it from your own lips at the shower. Mom heard it. You were planning to take the inheritance, divorce me, and disappear, using our baby as a means to an end." Serena flinched, her eyes widening. She clearly hadn't expected Eleanor to have overheard. For a moment, she seemed genuinely stunned. Then, with a practiced fluidity, she changed tactics. Her face crumpled, and she began to sob dramatically, placing both hands protectively over her visibly pregnant belly. "How can you say such cruel things? Especially now. Think about our baby, Daniel. You're hurting our child with these terrible accusations." Eleanor, unmoved by the theatrical display, interjected calmly, her voice firm. "That child, Serena, will always be a part of this family, regardless of your choices. Arthur's trust ensures that, and that child will always be loved and protected." At Eleanor's words, Serena's sobs abruptly ceased, her eyes, still brimming with feigned tears, hardened into flinty chips of ice. The pretense was over. "Fine," she spat, her voice laced with disdain. "Fine. You want the truth? Yes, I didn't sign up for this. I thought I was marrying into money, into a comfortable life, not some ridiculous financial hostage situation where an old woman controls everything and I have to wait 25 years for what's rightfully ours. This entire charade with the trust is a joke. I wanted financial freedom, not endless hoops and a jealous mother-in-law breathing down my neck." Daniel stared at her, the last vestiges of his love and trust shattering into irreparable pieces. His face was a mask of devastation, his body slumped. "Get out, Serena," he said, his voice low, trembling with suppressed rage and profound hurt. "Get out of my house. You can stay at the Oakwood condo for now. I'll have my lawyer contact you about the divorce arrangements." Serena scoffed, pushing her chair back again. "Gladly," she sneered, gathering her purse. She cast one last, venomous look at Eleanor. "You haven't heard the last of this," she threatened, before sweeping out of the dining room and slamming the front door behind her. After the door closed, leaving an aching silence in its wake, Daniel simply collapsed back onto the sofa, burying his face in his hands. His shoulders shook. "I'm such a fool, Mom," he choked out, his voice thick with tears. "Such a blind, stupid fool." Eleanor moved to him, sitting beside him, pulling his head gently onto her shoulder. She held him as he wept, stroking his hair, her own heart aching for his pain, but also filled with a fierce protectiveness. She had saved him, for now. She had won this round, but as she listened to her son's heartbroken sobs, Eleanor harbored no illusions that Serena would give up easily. This was far from over. The morning after the explosive confrontation, a faint, tentative knock sounded at Eleanor's front door. She opened it cautiously, half expecting a delivery, but instead found Serena standing on her porch. Gone was the perfectly coiffed, radiant image. Serena's hair was disheveled, her eyes red-rimmed and swollen from crying, her face devoid of makeup, and, for the first time, its usual polished mask. She looked vulnerable, almost fragile and deeply shaken. The sight was startling. Eleanor, Serena whispered, her voice hoarse. I, I need to talk to you. Eleanor, despite the unexpected appearance, remained outwardly impassive. She stood aside, allowing Serena to enter, her gaze piercing. What is it, Serena? She asked, her tone neutral, offering no comfort, no concession. Serena wrung her hands, avoiding Eleanor's eyes. I made a terrible mistake, she began, her voice cracking. Everything you said last night, everything Daniel said, it was true, my past, my intentions, but I changed. I really did. After I met Daniel, something shifted. I didn't want the money just for myself anymore. I wanted it for our family. She looked up, her red eyes pleading. I know it sounds hollow after everything, but it's the truth. Eleanor's expression remained unyielding. Hollow is an understatement, Serena. You were exposed, your entire plan laid bare, and now, conveniently, you've had a change of heart. Forgive me if I find your timing suspect. No, it's not like that, Serena insisted, a fresh wave of tears welling in her eyes. Yes, I was angry. Yes, I was furious that the money wasn't easily accessible. But last night, seeing Daniel's face, hearing Arthur's words, it broke something in me. And this baby, she added, her hands instinctively going to her belly. I know I said terrible things, but feeling this life inside me, it's different. I didn't expect to feel this way. I genuinely care for Daniel and for this child. I know I've been awful, but please believe me. Eleanor watched her carefully, searching for the telltale signs of deception, the subtle shift in her eyes, the practiced cadence in her voice. But Serena looked genuinely distraught, exhausted. Yet Eleanor knew better than to be swayed by emotion alone. Why, Serena? Eleanor asked, her voice cutting through the plea. Why stay? The money isn't accessible, not in the way you wanted. Your plan, the one you so callously outlined in my garden, failed. So why are you here? Why bother with this act if that's what it is? Serena's gaze fell to the floor. A long moment of silence stretched between them, punctuated only by the distant chirping of birds. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper, raw and broken. Because despite everything, Eleanor, I do love him. I didn't expect to. I went into this purely for the money, yes, I admit it. But Daniel, he's kind, he's honest, he makes me laugh. He made me feel safe in a way I never have before. And this baby, it's real. My feelings for them both, they're real. It's messed up, I know. I hate myself for it. But it's true. Eleanor continued to scrutinize her mind sifting through Serena's words, weighing them against Chloe's report, against her own intuition. She saw the exhaustion, the shame, and something that looked surprisingly like genuine remorse. It was a complex tableau of emotions, unlike the polished, calculating persona she had come to despise. Could it be true? Could the depth of her own deceit have shocked even Serena herself into a moment of genuine self-reflection? Please, Eleanor, Serena pleaded, stepping closer, her voice desperate. Just give me a chance. Let me prove it. I know I don't deserve it, but I'll do anything. Please talk to Daniel. Please intercede for me. I can't lose him. Eleanor held up a hand. I can't promise anything, Serena. Daniel is deeply hurt. What you did was unforgivable. But I will think about it. She needed time to process this new, unexpected development. She needed advice from someone who understood the complexities of human nature, someone she could trust implicitly. As soon as Serena had left, Eleanor called Dorothy. She recounted the morning's visit, Serena's unexpected confession, her plea for a second chance. Dorothy listened patiently, then offered her counsel. Eleanor, Dorothy said, her voice thoughtful. Words are cheap, especially from someone like Serena. But actions tell the real story. If she truly means it, she'll be willing to do the hard work, to face the consequences, to prove herself not just with pretty words, but with consistent, difficult choices. Dorothy suggested a path of careful observation, of setting real, actionable conditions for any possibility of reconciliation. Eleanor agreed. Later that day, she called Daniel, who was still reeling, trying to process the enormity of Serena's betrayal. Daniel, she said gently, Serena came to see me this morning. She's asking for a chance to prove herself. She claims her feelings for you and for the baby are real. Daniel scoffed, bitterness in his voice. Real? After everything, Mom? How could I ever trust her? You don't have to, Eleanor replied, her voice firm. Not yet, but I propose a path forward, a structured one, that might give you answers. It involves counseling, both individual and couples. And it involves time, a lot of time for her to truly demonstrate her commitment, not to the money, but to you and this child. And if she agrees, if she embraces this challenge, then maybe, just maybe, there's a glimmer of hope. But it's her choice, Daniel, and it's your choice to even consider it. She explained her own idea for a deeper test, a path that would genuinely prove Serena's intentions or expose her further. Daniel listened, his initial resistance slowly softening into a reluctant consideration. Okay, Mom, he finally said, a tremor in his voice. Okay, I'll think about it, if she's truly serious about showing remorse. Eleanor then called Serena. Her voice was calm, measured. Serena, I've spoken with Daniel. He's willing to consider a path forward, but it will be difficult. It will require complete honesty, transparency, and a genuine commitment to repair the damage. I'd like for you both to come over for dinner again tomorrow night. We need to have an important discussion about what that path might entail. Serena's voice, though still tinged with weariness, held a renewed spark of hope. Yes, absolutely, Eleanor. Anything. I'll do anything. Eleanor hung up the phone, a heavy sigh escaping her lips. Serena's eagerness was still alarming, but for the first time it felt tinged with something other than agreed. It felt like desperation, perhaps even a desperate hope for redemption. The game was still on, but the rules had changed, and the stakes were higher than ever. Eleanor spent the next day in a quiet preparation. She made a simple, comforting meal, but her focus wasn't on the food. Her heart was a battleground of hope and skepticism. She prayed her instincts about Serena's potential for change were right, that the glimmer of remorse she had seen wasn't just another performance. Dinner that evening was a strained affair. Daniel was polite, but his distance from Serena was palpable, a chasm of hurt and distrust. Serena, in turn, was nervous and subdued, picking at her food, her usual charming banter replaced by quiet humility. The vibrant energy that once filled the room was gone, replaced by a heavy, uncertain silence. After the meal, Eleanor led them into the living room, where she had placed a folder on the coffee table. This time, it wasn't a folder of evidence against Serena, but a document that could potentially pave the way for a new beginning. She sat opposite them, her gaze steady. Daniel, Serena, Mudino, she began, I've thought long and hard about what a true commitment to rebuilding trust would look like. And I believe it needs to be transparent, and it needs to be legally binding to protect everyone involved, especially our grandchild. She pushed the folder across the table. This is an amended prenuptial agreement. It addresses the issues we discussed last night, specifically regarding the inheritance and the family assets. Serena looked at the document with trepidation, her eyes wide. Daniel picked it up, scanning the clauses. Eleanor explained, it stipulates that should Serena initiate a divorce at any point within the next 10 years, she would forfeit any claim to the family assets beyond what the court determines as standard child support for Violet. No spousal support from the trust, no direct access to the principal set aside for Daniel or the child's future. It makes any attempt at an inheritance scheme financially impossible. It's a true test, Serena, of your commitment to Daniel and to this family beyond any monetary gain. A profound silence descended upon the room. Serena's hands trembled visibly, her gaze fixed on the document. Eleanor watched her, holding her breath, knowing this was the moment of truth. Would the old Serena resurface, enraged at the denial of her true objective? Or would the woman who had pleaded for a second chance prove herself? Slowly, Serena reached out, her fingers tracing the legal text. She took a deep, shaky breath, her eyes brimming with fresh tears, but this time they seemed to be tears of a different kind, of shame, perhaps, or even a nascent acceptance. She looked at Daniel, her expression one of raw vulnerability. Then, without a word, she turned to Eleanor, met her gaze, and whispered, "Do you have a pen?" Eleanor produced one, her heart pounding. Serena took the pen, her hand still trembling. But then, with a surprising firmness, she scrawled her signature across the bottom of the document. Daniel, who had been watching his wife intently, looked genuinely impressed. He picked up the pen next, a faint, almost imperceptible smile touching his lips. "What's fair is fair," he murmured, and signed his name beside Serena's. Serena turned to Daniel, her eyes still wet, but now filled with a flicker of hope. "Daniel," she said, her voice soft but sincere, "I know words aren't enough right now, but I promise you I will earn back your trust, however long it takes, for you and for our baby." Months later, the path to healing was arduous, marked by counseling sessions, difficult conversations, and slow, incremental steps towards rebuilding trust. Daniel was cautious, but Serena, to Eleanor's surprise, was unwavering in her commitment. One afternoon, during a minor health scare that put Serena on temporary bed rest, Eleanor found herself spending more time with her daughter-in-law. In the quiet intimacy of those days, a deeper confession emerged. Serena, her voice hushed, revealed a past trauma. An abortion at 16, coerced by her own mother, who had relentlessly instilled in her the belief that her only value lay in her looks and her ability to marry for wealth. "My mother taught me to see every relationship as a transaction," Serena confessed, tears streaming down her face. "She told me I had to use what I had to get ahead, because nobody else would look out for me. That abortion, it broke me, but it also hardened me, made me believe love was weakness." Then, her hands resting on her swollen belly, she whispered, "Feeling this baby kick, it made me realize I was becoming my mother, using a child as leverage, and I hated it. I hated myself." She looked at Eleanor, a raw plea in her eyes. "If something ever happens to me, Eleanor, will you tell my child the real story? Not just the ugly parts, but that I changed, that I fought to be better?" Eleanor, deeply moved by the unexpected confession, gently squeezed Serena's hand. The layers of deceit, the cynical ambition, now made a twisted kind of sense, born from deep-seated pain and a warped upbringing. Serena was eventually released from the hospital and put on strict bed rest. Eleanor visited daily, bringing meals, helping around the house, and engaging Serena in long conversations. In these quiet moments, Eleanor began to see glimpses of a genuine, thoughtful woman beneath a carefully constructed facade. A woman who was slowly, painstakingly, emerging from the wreckage of her past. One afternoon, Serena looked at Eleanor, a tentative smile on her face. "Daniel and I were talking names," she said softly. "If it's a girl, we were thinking Violet, after your grandmother, and if it's a boy, James, after Arthur." Eleanor's heart swelled. The suggestion, born not of obligation but genuine respect, was a profound testament to Serena's change. Eleanor, feeling a growing sense of hope, began painting a mural in the nursery, a vibrant garden, blooming with life, symbolizing healing and new beginnings. As the weeks turned into months, Serena's dedication to making amends, to truly connecting with Daniel and preparing for motherhood, became undeniable. One evening, she approached Eleanor, her eyes shining. "Eleanor," she began, "Daniel and I are renewing our vows next month in the garden. It's important to us, and I was hoping you would be my witness." Eleanor, tears stinging her eyes, simply nodded, a profound sense of peace settling over her. The day came and the baby, a beautiful, healthy girl, was born. Violet Eleanor Wilson. Holding her granddaughter, a tiny bundle of pure innocence, Eleanor felt a circle complete, a new chapter begin, bathed in the glow of hard-won hope. 6 months later, Daniel and Serena stood in Eleanor's rose garden, bathed in the soft afternoon light, renewing their vows. Eleanor stood proudly beside Serena, a silent witness to a transformation she once thought impossible. Later, as they sat together on the porch swing, the scent of jasmine heavy in the air, Serena leaned her head back against the cushion, a soft smile on her lips. "You know, Eleanor," she said quietly, "I was terrified of you when we first met, because you see people so clearly, even when they try to hide." Eleanor smiled, a genuine warm smile. "Arthur always said I had a keen eye. He also taught me that people are capable of both great good and terrible mistakes, but it's in choosing which path to nurture, which person to become, that defines us." She looked at Serena, then at the vibrant garden, a metaphor for the new life blooming within their family. Serena was choosing to nurture the good, forging new family bonds based not on deceit or expectation, but on choice, on effort, and on hard-won wisdom.